Welcome to Health Crusaders. I'm Bob Priest. And if you're here, I know you're looking for answers, just like I was. I thought I was doing everything right, but then out of nowhere, I had a stroke. One moment I was fine, the next, my world was turned upside down. That moment changed everything. Traditional medicine helped me survive, but I didn't want to just survive. I wanted to thrive. That's when I discovered spiritual, holistic, alternative, and functional health, redox signaling, natural healing, biofeedback, energy work, and much more. When I applied these principles, my recovery took off. My energy came back, my body responded, and I realized healing isn't just about medication. It's about mind, body, and spirit. That's why I started Health Crusaders, to share my journey and bring you real experts, practitioners, and stories of transformation. If you're ready to take control of your health and explore new possibilities, you're in the right place. Let's get started. Welcome back to another episode of Health Crusaders, the show where we uncover powerful healing journeys and connect with practitioners who are changing the way we think about health and vitality. I'm your host, Bob Priest, and today I'm honored to welcome someone whose approach to healing resonates deeply with what we're all about here on this show, Karen Eld. Karen is a holistic wellness practitioner with a rare gift, the ability to guide others through deep healing on the physical, emotional, and spiritual levels. She's a registered biodynamic craniosacral therapist, that's a mouthful, an audiotronics practitioner, and someone who's spent decades immersed in energy healing, sound therapy, and somatic awareness. Whether she's working with someone in person, in her Maryland studio, or across the world remotely, Karen helps people uncover the real root of chronic discomfort and illness, often hidden far beneath the surface. Karen, I've been looking so forward to this conversation today, and welcome to Health Crusaders.
Thank you so much for having me today. I'm so happy to be here.
That's great. I'm so looking forward to this. And so let's just get right into this. So let's talk about where your story begins. You shared with me that traditional medicine once told you, quote, "This is good as it's going to get." But you didn't accept that, did you?
No, I did not.
So tell us a little bit how you helped others who have maybe heard that same sentence.
So for me, after a car accident, which was my third accident, none of them my fault. I still will insist I'm a good driver. But this third accident was really a doozy. And I did hear those words, "This is as good as you're going to get." And I was only in my 20s. And it really affected so many aspects of my life. So growing up with a mother who worked for a chiropractor, my doctor was open to me going to that. I then branched out to acupuncture and then branched out to Reiki and clairvoyant healing and all sorts. If you name it, I tried it. And what I found is that these modalities addressed a layer of the injuries that my doctors didn't, and that was the emotional aspect. So often we look at an injury and it's presenting, "Oh, my knee hurts, and we can't get it fixed. And we go to the doctor and they're looking at the knee and focus. Let's look at the knee. When sometimes it could be coming from something outside of our body, an emotional trauma, spiritual trauma even. So I went on to gain a lot of leverage in my healing. I got better, but I still wasn't 100%. I still had chronic pain and some other issues. Fast forward 20 years, I went through a divorce, which was pretty traumatic and stressful. And that added stress kind of brought up all these old injuries again. And I found myself even more disabled. And through that, I found an osteopath. And for those who don't know, an MD is a medical doctor, a DO is a doctor of osteopathy. A DO has additional training above and beyond an MD, and they do adjustments. Unlike a chiropractor, these are craniosacral adjustments. So when we say craniosacral, we're talking about the craniosacral fluid in the body, in the spine, in our nervous system, and that's by and large where the adjustments begin. Through that modality, I have no pain now. I'm 57 years old. It is 30 years since my car accident. And I would say the only thing I've been told not to do is back bends in yoga.
That is an amazing story. And I know there's a lot more in depth to your story as we get into this further, but you hit on some areas that I just think most people misunderstand about healing. You talked about, I've got a pain in my knee, but it may not be coming from your knee. It may be something totally unrelated outside your body, like you said, or it may be really coming from somewhere else in your body. Is that correct?
That's correct. So sometimes it could be coming from the shoulder. You've injured the shoulder, you're holding your posture differently, your whole body's reset, and that throws the knee off. So that is one of the things I love about craniosacral work is you may come in with a knee pain. We would never focus on that. We notice it, but we don't come with a protocol that's pre-thought, pre-planned. We listen to the client's system. We work with the breath of life, which is a biblical term. And through those working with the client in the breath of life, the therapist listens to the body, and that's the protocol. The protocol is given to us.
That's really interesting. And I'm going to interject a little bit here in my own personal life. I had a stroke about 8 years ago, and my whole right side basically went numb. I call it numb. It's just where the nerve endings were damaged. But my entire right hand, all 5 fingers were numb. And I went to an emergency room. They totally focused on the numbness in my hand, even though it was starting to progress through all my body, and decided because because of my age, I had some degeneration in my neck, that it was pinched nerve. 5 fingers now, I'm telling you, are numb. I have a good friend that he was a former student of mine. I was a teacher for many years. He was a chiropractor in my local town, and I went to see him when I got home. Again, still not knowing I had a stroke because it was still manifesting through my body.
Wow.
It wasn't 5 minutes in his office because I said, all five. And he goes, all five? And I said, yeah. And he says, you've had a stroke. First words out of his mouth before he even touched me. And I said, why would you say that, Ray? And he goes, because the way the nerves work, you either have 2 fingers or 3 fingers that are numb, but not all 5 because you've got pinched nerve. And sure enough, he was correct.
Wow.
And again, when you're talking about other modalities, whether it's chiropractics or the craniology stuff you're talking about, we've not been told that stuff. We've gone to the Western way of medicine all our lives, and you have this problem, you get this script, and you go on your merry way. And I think that's where people are being left out. And so, was there a moment that, other than what you've already shared, that flipped the switch for you and made you go all in on this kind of work?
I think it was when they told me this is as good as you're going to get.
You didn't like that term, did you?
No. And at the time, I was working in commercial construction, but I wanted to be a hairdresser. And they told me, you'll never be able to do hair full time.
Oh, wow.
And I said, you watch me. And I did for 20 years.
Yeah,
and heals.
don't tell me I can't do something,
That's
right?
right. So I think really that was it. I've always been fascinated by um, alternative, by magic, by possibility. I mean, I've always been like that in my life. So that thread was already there.
You use the
Um,
word magic, and I'd like to hop on that because, we might think it's magic, but our bodies are so wonderfully made, and all the systems in our body, they communicate. They talk to one another. That's the magic, really, isn't it?
it is. It is. Um, and I think with Western medicine, and again, doctors are great, but in my opinion, in conjunction with alternative healing, you can really move mountains because we're not only looking at the physical body, the bones, the organs, the blood, the lymph, but also the emotional body, which we see is just kind of outside the body, and then also the spiritual body. And we also work with the social nervous system.
But they all come together to
Mm-hmm.
make this body, though.
Yes,
So, one of the things you said that struck me is that the root of the issue isn't always in the physical, it's in the physical body. And that flips the whole Western model on its head, right?
I agree. Yes.
So, talk us through what it means to approach illness through the lens of emotional or spiritual imbalance. And maybe share an example where that shift made all the difference for a client or yourself or other maybe stories without divulging who they are that
Mm-hmm.
really kind of brings this all home.
Well, I think one of my favorite stories is I worked with a young lady who suffered so badly from migraines. She also had POTS, which is becoming more and more prevalent. But the migraines were so debilitating. She thought she'd always have to live with her parents. She never thought she'd have a full time job.
Mm.
She never thought she'd have a relationship or a marriage or anything like that. I mean, it was very debilitating for her. We worked together for about a year and a half, maybe monthly. And one of the things we work with is cranial compression, which, of course, if your bones are compressed, of course, that could bring headaches, but also cranial compression is highly indicative of pelvic compression. And this young lady grew up in a very conservative, I might even say cultish religion, where sexuality was really shamed, where people can't date without an escort, that type of thing. So what I found is that was one of the things that was causing it was the clenching in the pelvis, which I think is a really big thing for women as we carry a lot of shame around sexuality. So, and even when I was in school, I thought, surely I can't have any, I'm not holding anything there. I was. So through the course of treatment, that it was also overactive fire element in the body. So we will work with the elements in the body. So now she is working full time, living on her own, dating, and swinging on a pole, learning to dance on a pole for fun, which has very much liberated her. So her whole life is turned around. I can't take all the credit. I mean, I always tell people keep going to see your doctor. But she attributes a good chunk to that, I think, to our work together.
That's awesome. And so you led her to the water. She made the decision to drink or not.
That's right. But
Yeah.
it was also building awareness in her.
Hmm.
So, do you notice that like things feel really tight around your head? And here's what you can do. Empowering people with knowledge, tools, and anatomy can really help them to even self treat.
And I think a point you just hit too is you need to be aware of what's going on with your body. I use the words now a lot with you need to be your own best advocate.
Yes.
Um, you know, Doctors in general, they have a protocol that they follow. Tick, 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 tick. When you go to holistic practitioners or alternatives, they don't go down the tick. They look at the whole spectrum of the person. So even though you might have a pain up here, that might not be where the pain is. It
It
really
might not even be yours.
it might not even be yours. It may be something else that's going on around you that has created this. I mean, our world is so complex. We try to put it in a little box and it really isn't. We can't
Yes.
do that. So, as a craniosacral therapist, as an acutronic person, Reiki, sound, these are all powerful modalities. And yet most people really don't understand how they work, especially remotely. So,
Yeah.
how would you explain the essence, the whole essence of your work to someone who's brand new to this? And what is the breath of life you mentioned? How does it show up in your sessions?
I'll actually start with that. The breath of life, it is a biblical term. It is the force that animates us. It's what makes us come alive. Some people might call it God. Not everybody loves that, but it is the force, the life force that animates us. So we are told during a session, when we're doing a session, to not even begin the session until that other force comes in the room. Because I will never take credit for any work or healing that has occurred. It's not me, it's Trinity. It is me, the client, and the breath of life.
Okay. And we're going to get into this a little bit more because I have a belief level there too that the words we speak, what comes out of our mouth is pretty powerful in both directions, positive and negative.
Mm-hmm.
Um, in the readings that I looked over all your information, you also mentioned intra-oral adjustments and how their impact on TMJ, depression, and many other things happen. So could you touch on that a little bit too for us?
Absolutely. I love the intraoral work, and that means we were actually going inside the mouth to make adjustments. There are some bones in the face that can only be accessed by going back in the mouth. Cranial compression, like we were talking about before, can also be highly related to depression. And as someone who suffered with depression since I was 10, that was a big shift for me because I had tried all the traditional means, the therapy. Again, some of it helpful. I tried taking medication. I'm not really a medication person. I didn't want to do that if I didn't have to. So in particular, it can help with TMJ in depression, but also sometimes neck pain can be tied into that. So many things can be tied in because the root of our nervous system is here and then at the sacrum. So if even a little tiny is off somewhere up here, it's going to affect our whole body, top down.
Right. Yeah. That's all this attached to our head, all the way down our back to our coccyx. It's a very important area. And if we don't treat it correctly, it's just like sitting. I've had a chair. I just changed the chairs out because my back was killing me at the end of the day, down in the lower part of my back. And I was like, what in the world's going on? Then I realized there's no padding lift in the chair. And I wasn't sitting up straight. I was slouching all the time.
Right.
Didn't realize it. And just happened to notice on one of my podcasts that you look like a humpback of Notre Dame on there. And I'm like, that's the problem. Totally different now. That's why I'm smiling more today.
More comfort.
More
You know,
comfort.
and with my experience, the upper palate of my mouth, it was pretty flat, which is indicative that something needs to shift. It should have a nice high arch.
Yep.
Now my mouth does.
Yeah, again, it's being your best advocate, right? Something that really caught my attention in your notes is that you said, quote, words are magic. That how we speak, even to ourselves, affects our healing. As someone who's worked in somatics, did I say that correct?
Yes.
That's pretty powerful, isn't it? So, how have you seen language, especially in trauma, verbal abuse, or even in your own self-talk, shape the healing process?
Wow. Verbal abuse is a big one for me, and I believe it is just as damaging as a physical abuse. It's just maybe the damage is unseen, but you see, it's not unseen because we carry the effects of it in our social nervous system, which is our face.
Hmm.
So if we're walking around with this history of verbal abuse on our face, guess who we're drawing in? More
People that
people that are going to
abuse.
do this.
Yeah.
So I think that's been a powerful tool to use in the healing sessions, because I'm very passionate about that, having been through it. Um, and as far as working remotely, I did want to touch on that too.
Go right
That's
ahead.
um, I so biodynamic craniosacral therapy actually is a hands-on technique. So if I'm doing a distance session, I can't call it that. But as I went to school during COVID, they had to kind of consider, can we do this remotely? Because we had tutors, we had all these sessions we had to do. And I'm thinking, of course you can. Of course you can. Because I had already been doing it through other modalities, energy healing. And for me, I would say, just as if you walk in a room, you can, full of people, you can tell who you want to go to and who you want to stay away from. I can feel that on a larger level. And sometimes I do use a proxy. I will hold a skull or a doll to feel into the person's body. But I can feel into the body and tell what's off. And they are always a little surprised how much they feel on their end.
I don't think people realize all the energy that's around us, the sound, the waves, I'm being a musician, being a person that's been around music all of my entire life. Um, Being a band director in a room and you have a bad chord or bad notes, it's obvious, you hear it. But when you bring everything in alignment, so when A440 is A440 and it's in alignment and those waves are moving at that megahertz, you can tell it lightens the load. You can feel the energy in your body. So people that poo-poo that energy thing, they don't realize that it's around us all the time. In my office right now, there's all kinds of energy in here, whether it's electric, whether it's the energy I'm feeling from our conversation, the energy I have in myself right now, just how I'm perceiving life in general as I sit here. But I also believe in the spiritual side of things. So when we talk about the power of words, just like in Ephesians 4:29, it talks about the power of words. What we speak is so powerful that it can damage or heal. It can take someone down or bring someone up. And how we choose to use those words are going to make the difference in how we think and feel, how we approach life in general, uh, how I make you feel when I have a conversation with you, one way or the other. So those words, I agree, are so powerful, and we can in just one word or two words, we can tear somebody down so bad that they never come back.
That's right. And
And
not only the actual word, but the way it's delivered, how we say it, the tone, the volume, everything about it.
so when it comes to health and our holistic being, how important, tell our audience how important you believe it is that the words we speak about our health, about our bodies, about the way we see things, about our attitude, etc. How important are those?
Extremely important. Extreme. I believe that we create our reality. I believe that breath of life comes in to animate us, to help us to create the world we want. And I believe we can do that.
Yeah. So do you believe in self-talk?
Believe in it. How so?
Well, I mean, I've told people, I've said to people, well, just what do you say to yourself? How do you
Mm,
talk to yourself? And they
yeah,
look at me kind of strange.
yeah,
Like, what do
I,
you mean?
definitely. I will notice when someone apologizes every 15 minutes, things like that. And you can, especially victims of verbal abuse, I think, will do that.
Well, they've been beat up so much verbally that they believe they're not worthy of anything else. And but once they get to that point where they feel that, then that's how they speak it.
So the thing is with abuse, though, there's always a gift, isn't there? I mean, I
Yeah,
think we have to go through these things in our life because it leads to something good.
right.
So I never will say I'm a victim to that. I am a victim to that because what it did for me was create a hypersensitivity because I always had to be watching the environment. Is there
Hmm.
an attack coming? Is something going to happen? Am I doing anything wrong? Um, and that was as a child. So I believe having to do that made me a good craniosacral therapist.
That makes a lot of sense. It really does. I think our past experiences definitely help us to, if we pay attention, help us to improve throughout life. So by the time we get to our ages, it kind of goes back to that, as we age, we get more wisdom if we actually think about the times we've gone through. So if you've had this kind of time in life where what you were speaking of, and as you get a little older and you realize, oh, I know what was going on now back then because I've experienced it. Now I know how I can take that and share with someone else and get them through this maybe a little quicker than I got through it. It's like me when I had my stroke, I'd spent a lot of time advocating in that space for others because when I first had the stroke, boy, did my self-talk and everything go different direction.
Mm,
I thought life was going to be different over. But I found the more I spoke, this isn't going to define me. This isn't going to make me the person I am today. Everything started changing. And even though I may still have a deficit or two from that stroke, it doesn't define me. It doesn't stop me. I have continued and I have found new places to go. I don't do the career that I once did as a music teacher. I'm doing something else because I found a passion from the, what is it, from the ashes,
mm-hmm.
and so I've learned how to use that to my benefit. And again, it comes into that self-talk. You could either talk yourself down and down and out, or you can talk yourself up into a different place.
Absolutely.
So I'm so fascinated. I've talked to a lot of folks that are in your space, maybe not quite as specific as yours, and I'm always interested in their visions. And so I'm going to ask you the same question: is I want to talk about the vision for your business. You mentioned in some of our conversation that you have a desire to serve both in person and remote, and to offer group healing courses and even a podcast or a YouTube platform one day. So if you could wave a magic wand, okay, and create your ideal practice, okay, think about that, and platform, what would it look like? And what's your biggest challenge stepping into that vision more boldly?
That's a good question. So we were talking about high sensitivity. That's something I like to help people with because there's a book Elaine Aron wrote called The Highly Sensitive Person. And that book changed my life because when you're a highly sensitive person, you grow up with people telling you you're too sensitive. And I often run into people like that in my practice. And then I get to tell them the great secret that, you know what, nothing's wrong with you. In fact, this is a gift. And you probably would make a really good healer yourself because of your high sensitivity. So, ideal practice is having clients coming into my beautiful studio in Gaithersburg, Maryland, having online clients because I have clients in the UK and throughout the US that I work with remotely. So that's a different type of session. I enjoy doing both. I have a course I'm redeveloping now that takes people through the chakras on the physical, emotional, and spiritual levels. I have done a course in manifesting your reality and how to do that. Like as we were talking about, I may bring that back. And mostly I like talking to people like yourself, where common knowledge around healing and spreading the good word that it works, because I really think it needs to get out there.
Well, that was one of my biggest reasons for starting my podcast. Um, I mean, I initially thought, I had a stroke, I can help reach stroke victims, survivors. But then it started turning into, because of my own experiences in Western medicine and my frustrations with that, that I started looking outside into some other areas, and my conversations started going in those directions. So then I started reaching out to holistic practitioners and the different variations of that theme, all the modalities. And then my curiosity just went wild. And so whether I believe 100% in all of the things that I've run into, that doesn't really matter. It's the fact that I'm trying to get those out so that people realize there's so many other opportunities, that you don't have to be stuck with the prescription pill, prescription pill, prescription pill. And it's not that those things don't help. I'm not poo-pooing that those aren't important, but if they don't have to be used, let's not use them.
Right. And oftentimes a pill can lead to another pill down the road, because
Yeah.
something's happening because of the side effect of that first pill.
Yeah, I have a very close friend that I take to the VA frequently for his appointments, and he has a shoebox at home that is full of vials of pills that every time I've taken him, they've given him something new. Had many conversations with him about that this isn't healthy. This is something wrong with this whole thought process. And and that's just one example. We should always be trying, in my opinion, we should always be trying to get off of those things as soon as we possibly can, because
Absolutely.
it shouldn't be something that we want to stay with for the rest of our life, especially if there's alternatives that we can holistically take care of ourselves through different modalities that are healthy. They're not
Mm-hmm.
going to hurt your body. So it's
But,
it's such an important topic, I think, to get this out, and that's why I love talking to people that practice like you do.
well, and veteran, I think, my gut around that is probably some post-traumatic stress, which nobody knows how to treat.
Drew.
So
Yeah, but that's interesting you bring that up because you've been through a lot in your life. I understand you had cancer. You talked about depression earlier, anxiety, PTSD, and yet you turn that pain into a purpose.
absolutely.
And in your
Yeah.
experience, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
In your experience, what most often holds people back from truly prioritizing their health, um, even when they know it matters?
Well, I think that people don't know any better. Like, a lot of people just grow up with maybe not a good role model, maybe not even knowing how to eat healthfully, or just not knowing.
Hmm.
And then what we do know is very limited. We got to go to the doctor. Well, we go to the doctor every year. So, what about maintenance? What about seeing someone for maintenance during the year,
Yeah, I mean, it's
seasonally?
important. It's good to have those conversations because your car has to have an oil change after so many miles, and transmission fluid and brake fluid and all that. Well, we have that stuff in us too. Just takes something
Exactly.
different. Um, so
But
that's
it's also
important.
time. I think everybody's very busy working, working, working now, and also money. And that is an issue in the alternative world practice, I would say. Um,
Well, insurance
there's
doesn't
no
cover everything.
insurance. Yeah,
Yeah, you have to be willing to understand that if I want to live longer, if I want to feel better, I'm probably going to have to do some things outside of the normal practice of medicine. I mean, I love going to my chiropractor. Um, I can tell when it's time because especially at our age, I'm 68 years young, but I'm sitting, so I'm everything's compressing. Over time, I need to do something about that. And boy, do I feel so much different when I come out than when I went in. And that same thing works in energy and being around certain sounds and the way we approach the world. When you go outside and just see how beautiful it is out there and what that does to our personal life. So it's so important. So what kind of advice would you offer someone who's listening today and feels stuck, or they're just surviving, maybe is the right word? What would you recommend?
Well, when you describe that person, they feel very frozen to me, like there's not a lot of movement, and that's probably somewhat in their body and some trauma trapped
Now,
in their emotional body.
when you
And
say movement, does that necessarily mean a physical movement or could be something else that's not moving?
it could be both, because I believe trauma keeps us trapped and frozen. And I believe our body holds traumas and our organs store emotions and traumas. And so this person needs to break out of the norm, which could be hard to do because trauma keeps you small and trapped and tight. But that first step of just reaching out and being curious, maybe just talking to a trauma therapist, trauma-informed therapist, to an acupuncturist, to a biodynamic craniosacral therapist, to a sound healer. Try something outside the norm.
Mhm.
So often we have something presenting as a physical injury when it's coming from emotional. Well, it can go the other way too, where we've had an emotional hurt or trauma, and then it's presenting in the body. So it can go both ways. We could hit our knee, and that could cause the depression. We could be depressed, and that can make our knee hurt.
Mm. One thing that I've really learned to and love about holistic practitioners is they don't get caught up on that one problem that's told. You walk into a doctor's office, my head hurts, that's the focal point. And they don't necessarily let you go anywhere else. My head hurts, but I also have this, and they don't let you go there. In the holistic practice world, they look at everything. It might be the pain may be up here, but we're going to talk about a lot of other things. We're going to explore, we're going to research, and that's a big difference, I think, in the way holistic practitioners go about their clients compared to the Western medicine world.
Absolutely. I mean, I know someone that's going through kidney issues right now. And when I told the person, oh, that's really highly associated with like prenatal existentialism, like, do I even want to come into this world? And
Hmm.
they said, oh my God, it's so weird you said that because my mom had a lot of trouble and she almost couldn't carry me. And so there's just so many fascinating
Yeah.
things about it. I think the hardest thing is for people to think outside the box of traditional medicine. If you
Well,
have an open mind, you're
yeah.
going to do well.
Well, when we go to a doctor, a lot of times they'll throw this pill at us and it doesn't work. So what do? They give us another one. There's an alternative and an alternative. Well, the same thing's true in holistic medicine, holistic approaches. So this particular approach, let's say acupuncture, doesn't necessarily get to the issue, but maybe the cranial, I can't get that word in my mouth, but the
Craniosacral.
craniosacral is a way to approach it. And you look. So I don't know why we don't think the same way there as when we walk into the place that we get one thing, until we finally find the one that makes us feel better. But why not do it naturally?
Right. And I think it's frequency too. It might take more than
Mhm.
one session. It might take 6 months. It might take a year
Well,
of visits monthly.
I know when I hurt my back many years ago as a band director, I literally crawled into the chiropractor's
Mm.
office and I kind of quasi stood up on my way out. I still was not there yet, but it took him 35, 45 days to get to where I could go from being so crouched over I couldn't stand up hardly to being straight and the pain was gone. And not one pill, you know,
Wow.
not one pill. It was just a process. And so I've seen that in my own personal life so many times. And so that's why I think there's just as a human being, we have to be our best advocate. And if popping that pill doesn't necessarily do anything better for you, keep
Hmm.
looking, keep looking, keep
That's
looking.
right.
So,
And you mentioned chiropractic. I wanted to tell you when I first found osteopathy, that doctor said, "Do you go to a chiropractor?" I said, "Yes." He said, "I want you to stop." And I thought, "Oh my God, how am I gonna?" So I thought I might explain the difference, which are both great. Because I mean, I would still go to a chiropractor if I needed to, but where the chiropractor's like, "Oh, this rib's out or this back, and we're going to do this adjustment." Very similar to what a craniosacral therapist does, except it happens in another way. And our holds are very gentle and soft.
mhm.
So we're not supposed to use any more weight than the weight of a nickel when we touch people. And there's no manipulation. We're just holding. And through that gentle hold, so much can shift the fascia, the bones, the lymph, the blood, everything. So a lot of some craniosacral therapists are called baby whisperers because after, if it was a particularly traumatic birth, that's can be a good time to work on a child, and we
Mm,
can do that without usually without touching them.
wow. Karen, this has been a rich and beautiful conversation, and I know people are going to want to connect with you after this. So, can you share where they can find you and how they can book a session with you and maybe learn more about what you offer? So, websites, Facebook, et cetera, whatever. Could you just go ahead and tell us, and then I'll put it in the notes as well.
Sure. My website is yoursoulshining.com, SOUL, Your Soul Shining. And I am on Facebook under Karen Ald. I don't do too much under my business page.
Okay.
Sessions can easily be booked by contacting me either remotely or in person. A little paperwork to fill out prior if you're coming in person. And I'm very active on LinkedIn too. I'm on LinkedIn. I shouldn't say very active. I'm on there.
Okay. Do you mind giving an email or a phone
Hmm.
number?
Um, my email is Karen at yoursoulshining.com.
Awesome. So, folks, if you've been told, quote, this is as good as it gets, I hope this conversation reminds you there's always more healing possible. We just have to go deeper. So, thanks for listening to Health Crusaders. Until next time, keep seeking, keep healing, and keep showing up for yourself.